Well, to me it's really all one big thing because it's the same members, but we'll sort of have... We've played a lot of songs. We're probably going to write a lot more songs, and there's Zwan, and which is a live rock band, or actually a studio rock band at this point. And then there's the Jolly Zwan, which is more acoustic based. And then I've heard that there's some other... heard tell of some other Zwans. Sometimes I hear myself talking about other Zwans, and I don't even know what I'm talking about. And I listen to myself talking about all these other Zwans, and people kind of, they smile at me. They seem to get uncomfortable when I tell them about these other Zwans.
Welcome to episode 39 of the Hipsters United podcast. My name is Chris, and joining me this week are Jason.
Hello.
Jill.
Hi.
And Andrew.
Hello.
Yeah, it's always best when you need a cough and you're in front of a microphone to lean towards the microphone and cough into it rather than leaning away. But the big news that we'll be devoting our entire show to this week is Billy's long, I won't call it a screed, I'll call it a proclamation on SmashingPumpkins.com, a mission statement, if you will, on his musical future. And thankfully, it has saved us from having to talk about Tila Tequila on the podcast. So thank you very much, Billy, for coming in at the nick of time.
What? You guys don't want to talk about Tila?
She's so hot and smart.
I mean, I'm sorry. She's just... I gotta say it.
Well, Billy covered a lot of ground in his mission statement, but we have to start somewhere, so let's go ahead and start with this. When he announced that Jimmy Chamberlain had left the group, Billy stated that he would continue to release music under the name The Smashing Pumpkins. What he didn't reveal until now is that he also has plans to release more solo material, as well as to start 2 new bands, which he neglected to name so as to prevent cyber squatters from capitalizing on his ideas. So this presumably means that Billy could be releasing music under 4 different monikers at once. Jason, you point out that this isn't the first time Billy's had this idea. Why don't you talk a little bit more about your the reference you made to the beginning of the start of Zwan?
Well, you provided me a good setup there with Mr. Matt Sweeney of Zwan Chavez fame, speaking about, Zwan, for anyone who remembers, was going to have these multiple incarnations. There were the True Poets of Zwan, which played some sort of electric pop rock. There was the Djali Zwan that played acoustic folky music. There were supposedly going to be other Zwans, as Matt Sweeney mentioned, but they never really came to form, so we don't know what they were called. But, nothing... this idea of Billy starting other bands, potentially they could be bands that are distinct in membership, right? So the Smashing Pumpkins could be Billy and Jeff, and Carrie Brown and Linda Strawberry and Mark Tulin of the Electric Prunes, but and then maybe his other bands will have other people, like maybe one of the bands apparently is a synthesizer band, whatever that means, and maybe that band is going to feature Matt Walker from The Most Dangerous Race or something, so
Chris Holmes.
Chris on Science, presumably that could be
Heavy metal machine.
Sorry. Presumably that could be what he means, but the Pumpkins already are edging close to a total revolving door of musicians. So, if he does one Pumpkins project and then he comes out with a new project that he's also running, and obviously he's going to be the key person in every one of these bands. If he starts a new project and it has different personnel, there seems to be nothing at this point that would prevent him from just calling that the Smashing Pumpkins. So, renaming it something else, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's more of a way for him to feel more free about experimenting with different sounds. Like he mentioned in the interview where he talked about the synthesizer, he mentioned how fans would kill him, or I forget exactly what he said, but something about if he doesn't work with something guitar driven, fans would be up in arms. So I
Yeah,
guess this is just a way for him to feel more free about doing things like that and not be tied down to, oh, what will be the reaction like when it doesn't sound like the Smashing Pumpkins.
yeah. If he does like a synthesizer album and then tries to go on tour as Smashing Pumpkins, probably freak out, right? So that's probably a good call. So yeah, another one of the bands he sounded like he. Well, I don't know if it's another band or the solo thing, but he talked about playing some acoustic stuff too. So again, that's reminiscent of the Zwan thing. So yeah.
I wonder if then that means that this is finally time for him to release the Chicago songs. He always said he would do it when he felt the time was right.
I don't know. He's not much for looking back like that, I don't think.
Yeah.
He's going to write 20 new songs instead of looking back to 20 old songs, I would say.
Yeah, I could see that being the Chicago songs showing up in some of the archival subscription service that they're talking about building up. Even though that wasn't ever under a Smashing Pumpkins aegis, it could.
Ooh.
It might get released through that through the Pumpkins, whatever Mr. Quinto comes up with, and and the band and Billy together, and whoever else is involved in figuring out how they're going to open up the archives to the fans in the future. So like Jason said, I wouldn't think that he would go back to the time of the Chicago songs and waste the promotional effort of putting out that as semi new, because most people haven't heard it, instead of coming up with something that's all new and releasing that. So,
well, a few fans have actually asked Frank on the SmashingPumpkins.com message board about whether Zwan and other material like that is going to be included once the archive project finally gets off the ground. And I think what Frank said was something to the extent of, all that stuff's in the archives, obviously, but he doesn't know where it will fit in. So
yeah,
we will have to see.
Go
ahead.
I was just going to say one nice thing about this recently unearthed April 2008 interview, which is really good, about half an hour long, but I recommend any fan watch it. The interviewer asked Billy about the Zwan stuff, and Billy actually, for the first time since the end of Zwan, said something about the music being good. He just didn't like the people. So at least he doesn't think the music was bad or something. I think that's a positive sign for that stuff coming out eventually. Someday, presumably those feelings of hating those immoral fucks, is just going to pass, and he'll put out that stuff.
Yeah, I think his line up to now has always been that he can't even go back and listen to that music just because of the memories it brings back. But I think you're right, eventually I think he'll finally be at peace with whatever happened back then.
Did you want me to go further in making a comparison between right now and what I called the dawn of Zwan?
Sure.
2000. Well, in 2000, when he started Zwan, obviously right after he broke up the Pumpkins, but really the person, he broke with James, right? I mean, that was really the only split that went on of, between him and someone he's been with forever, and that's now happened again with Jimmy. So I think he's coming off a big split with a longtime partner, right? And he, if you read this, he's just done a lot of I don't want to call it dopey, but really positive talk lately. Pumpkins are gonna be a source of love and light and all these super positivity. And I associate the Zwan era with an unbelievable. Like the Care Bears, opening their heart and having a rainbow shoot out, That was the vibe. I mean, if you went to a Zwan concert, and it was real. I mean, that's the thing. It sounds completely ridiculous, but if you went to a Zwan show, I mean, it was the happiest, most joyous thing emanating from the stage. It was bizarre.
At least in the early days.
Yeah, I can't. That was most of the Zwan shows I ever went to, I guess. But I always had this like half-baked notion that the positivity was like partial like reaction against the negative atmosphere because it was right after September 11th, right? And everyone was so down and there was terror and all this stuff, and then it was like Zwan, and you go to a Zwan show and it's like super happy. It was kind of weird. But, I remember reading things saying how out of step they were with the times, not necessarily in mood. I mean, people would write that would say it was sound, but I almost thought it was more about a mood thing. But also, before he started Zwan, he was kind of like bumming around the West with Bjorn and Matt Sweeney and Jimmy, and they were just like jamming around, and it's like it reminds me of the same thing he said, like how he's out in L.A. and he's hanging out with Carrie Brown and Linda Strawberry and Mark Toolin, and we're just jamming, and just totally reminded me of that, like, we don't really have an agenda, don't really have a plan, we're just kind of gonna do some music thing, which I that sounds like maybe it's not that notable, but when you compare it to the rest of Billy's career, I think that is pretty notable. I mean, at what other time besides that one was he just kind of in this loosey-goosey, I'm going to play with some people and start working on some music? I mean, it was always, before it was like, we're the Pumpkins, we're on tour, then we're recording, then we're on tour, then we're recording, and they're recording as an album, right? And it's like Smashing Pumpkins and these people. So I don't know. Not this multiple band thing, but so there you go. We may be headed back for an explosion of rainbows, which would be okay with me.
Well, another time that Billy was in more than one band was back when there was the Star Children side project, and you mentioned the possibly having different people in every band, and I guess when they were doing the Star Children, it was mostly Smashing Pumpkins, but also with some extra friends, and that's kind of how I envision the multiple bands. It'll just be different kind of groups of friends.
With synthesizers.
I just think it's totally Billy that it's not just he's going to have a side project, he's going to start two bands besides the one that he's currently in. Not just one side project, but two at once.
And he's going to go solo.
And he's going solo.
That's the funniest thing about it. Oh my gosh. It's like Trent Reznor. I'm going solo!
I can't wait for the next Reznor album, man.
I mean,
It'll be so much better than the Nine Inch Nails album.
It's totally absurd, but it's fun. I mean, I think it's funny and fun, so it doesn't bother me. But some people are like, oh my god, that Billy Corgan is ridiculous. I'm like, you didn't figure that out already? Yeah. It's a little crazy. Remember that album called Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness?
I think he's pretty self-aware of his delusions, or not delusions. I mean, look at Star Children. What was one of the songs they put out?
Delusions of Candor.
Exactly. It was a pun, exactly, on this particular principle.
He's totally aware of it, which is why it's funny and cool, and why all the people who take him seriously are douchey. I mean,
well, and the funny thing is, like, the indie music media mavens just want to like run ramrod, whatever. I'm totally mixing my metaphors here, but they want to basically crucify him for having these grandiose ideas, but then it's like, oh my gosh, when is Sufjan Stevens going to do his next album on a state? Like, he made these grand. And keep in mind, I'm a Sufjan fan, but when he first started his very first album about a state, he said, "I'm going to do one for every state," and the indie music media was just like, "Oh my god, this is going to be so amazing." Well, he's since done two. Maybe it doesn't ever pan out, but it's good to have big plans. Otherwise,
yeah, you shoot for the moon and you reach. Lower Earth orbit.
Or Topeka.
But yeah, I mean, the indie blog media obviously is ridiculous, but just this thing about Billy's sense of humor. I mean, I just made a post, in fact, it's at the top of hipstersunited.com right now, about Pitchfork taking a joke out of this this message that we're discussing from Billy, dropping the predicate, so literally he just has a sequence of nouns, and then they tell you what he meant, right? Like, they don't let, instead of quoting quoting the entire sentence, which would make it he was making at least some sort of like not totally serious comment. They actually quoted half of the sentence, and then told you that he was saying that's what he was, right? When the full sentence says, apparently if one was to read the songs in that way, I am these things, right? And Pitchfork's just like, Billy Corgan says he's part mercury filled. What a weirdo.
Maybe we should start giving them the Pitchfork treatment. Echo chamber. Recent rambling blog post.
But nobody cares about them. That's why it wouldn't be funny and no one would read it. Oh, snap.
Oh.
Ryan Domball of Pitchfork says, I'm weird. No one cares because you're Ryan Domball. Anyway, sorry. Okay, let's move on.
Bring it on, Ryan.
Ooh, snap. You're in the echo chamber.
Well, no matter how you slice it, the four different bands does imply a lot of band members, but Billy didn't reveal very much on that front during his long message. He did mention that Jeff would be playing the part of guitarist during the percussion auditions, but did not mention the names of any of his other recent collaborators. And I think it was more notable that Billy didn't mention Jimmy at all, since Jimmy was the only other full-time Smashing Pumpkin. But we also didn't hear anything about Ginger or Lisa. And add this to the news that Ginger is pregnant and Lisa is releasing a solo album and going to be doing a residency this summer.
Yay!
And I start to get the impression that they won't be really working with Billy anytime soon with any of his four bands that he's going to be a part of. Jill, do you think this is the last we've heard from Ginger and Lisa?
I don't know. I'm really unsure. They had a good couple of year run there, and if Ginger, from what she's said and from how she's portrayed in the documentary and so forth, seems like she's ready to start a family, and as you know, she's going to be touring around with her husband, who's opening he's playing keys for Morrissey on the upcoming tour. So I think that they're going to be, I'm not sure that there's a lot of future Smashing Pumpkins work in the cards for them right now. It doesn't seem, from what I've read, it doesn't seem that they've had a falling out of any kind. Perhaps they've been fired or let go for the meantime right now because Billy's in the studio and doesn't necessarily need the help recording. I think it's always been pretty clear that they've just been touring musicians and that there's been love for them on the tour, but I really don't know. I don't know what to expect because there's not been really anything to go on. I'm hoping that I'll get to interview Lisa this summer because she's doing the residency here in New York, and I definitely plan on making it out to a couple of her shows, and I'll probably interview her for the Pumpkins, thesmashpumpkins.com.
Start sculpting her head out of clay now. Hopefully you'll have it done by then.
Oh my god. How are you doing?
Hi, Lisa. My best friend Sorry, I'm not going to make fun of them. That's so pathetic. Sorry if you're listening, ladies.
It's like when my friend died, and your presidency gave me something to hold on to.
Anyway. I don't know that I have any insight about their future contributions to the band. I'm just as in the dark as the rest of you.
You know who is going to be in the band, though? Kerry Brown, Billy's best man.
Not his musical soulmate, just his best man.
Not his life partner, just his best man.
Best man.
You see Kerry on the next tour, playing Zeitgeist with Billy on acoustic guitar.
So, what do you think about the future possibility of the Smashing Pumpkins via what's his name? Nielsen? Dax Nielsen playing with them and doing a father-son lineup with the Tint.
That's the wrong sheet, remember. That's funny. But
Double billing.
Rick Nielsen guesting with both bands.
Tinted Windows opens for Smashing Pumpkins, or Smashing Pumpkins opens for Tinted Windows?
We'll see how their album does when it drops later this month.
I'm guessing better than Zeitgeist.
Well, what did you guys think about Billy not mentioning Jimmy Chamberlin at all? I mean, surely in 2,000 words he could have said, "Thanks, Jimmy." something like that. Should we read into anything that he didn't mention him at all?
I think he doesn't want, and this is something, feel free to interpret this negatively about Billy. I think he doesn't want there to be any sense that what he's going to do is what Billy's going to do in the future, or something like that, right? So, if he's like harping on, yes, my longtime, most incredibly valued musical partner, the guy who shared my musical vision and soul for 20 years, is now gone. Look forward to my next album, which will be half as good as what it could have been. That's not a vibe he wants to create, right? And it's almost hard to say anything that wouldn't at least indirectly contribute to that vibe, right? If he praises Jimmy and his contributions to the band all these years, it kind of makes it like the next album is going to be with a lesser drummer or something, someone who has less chemistry with Billy. So, that's at least a practical, almost businessy reason not to do it. But, business is a word that nobody likes. But, in terms of keeping the excitement around the band, it's a little cold, but it's sensible in some ways, I think.
I mean, clearly, if he had said something about Jimmy, that would have been the story. So I think that by not saying it, he at least accomplished the goal of getting people who are writing and covering this statement that he made to talk about the things that he said that he's going to be doing in the future. Whereas if he did say something about Jimmy, I think that would have been the headline, and everything else would have just been kind of, oh yeah, and he also said this other stuff.
That's a really great point. It reminds me of when Zeitgeist was coming out, and they didn't want to address the James and Darcy question because they wanted to put the focus on the music, like the exact same thing, right? Mm-hmm. It's like if you talk about James and Darcy, everything becomes about that, or at least that's what they felt, right? So could be they viewed that they think they had some success with that, and he's doing it again.
I wonder, this actually brings up an interesting question. I wonder how much of what Billy communicates to the fans via the website actually goes through their press organization at Mitch Snyder. I'm just speculating, but I would imagine that they wish to have some control over it, or have input into what particularly he puts out. So, I don't know.
I can't even see what they put on the website anymore, so I'll ask for that. True.
Yeah, I mean, the only problem with the whole thing is that it does kind of, ignores the elephant in the room. He can't just kind of brush it under the rug. Like, he tried with James and Darcy, and I guess it worked to some extent, but he still had the problem of, in interviews, people would try and ask him that, and he would refuse to answer it or refuse to do the interview.
He chalked it off to it being their choice. He said, I invited everyone back, and only Jimmy came back. That was usually a stock answer, was they were welcome to come back, and they didn't. So,
well, they're welcome to come back on Billy's terms, which is, that's understandable. I mean,
Yeah.
But so, I imagine that's probably similar with Jimmy. It's like if you're willing to do X, Y, and Z, you can, great, and if you're not, you're not, right? Whatever X, Y, and Z is, and that could be coming from Jimmy's side too, right? Like, it's almost the same thing. It's like Jimmy wasn't willing to work with me because I sold Today to Visa. It's like if Jimmy had been willing to work with Billy on the terms that they sell Today to Visa, then it would have been fine. I hope everyone knows that I know nothing about what the reason was. That was just an example.
Well, Billy's also finally let us in on some details behind plans for releasing new music. We've heard ad nauseum about how there will be no more Smashing Pumpkins albums, at least not in the traditional format of approximately 12 songs released all at once on a compact disc. But he finally gave us some information on what will be released. So he's planning on releasing somewhere in or around 44 songs over the next 2 to 3 years, on somewhere around the order of one per month, starting tentatively in September. And at the end, and I use the word loosely since I don't think he even knows yet what or when the end will be, Billy envisions a multimedia package containing all the songs plus some sort of video component. So, what do you guys think of this idea? I think it has some definite positives in that there is a big break between albums where casual fans lose interest in the band and may never return, but on the other hand, there isn't one big item to put all your promotional energy towards. And if he's polishing and releasing a song every month, it doesn't really seem like Billy leaves much room for a full-scale tour like we've seen in the past couple of years. Andrew, why don't you start?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most exciting times for the band, for me, was during the melancholy year, but from like basically 1996, basically, where he had about every 3 months another single came out, and it had a whole bunch of had the single out, had Tonight Tonight and Zero and 33 and all that, and each one of those singles came with about 5 or 6 songs that we have a nice. If you get back to the way that they're going to release things is that they're going to have small chunks, a few songs in a nice, orderly, regular sort of scheduled release. I think that will be interesting and something to kind of build interest over time. I think it's a worthwhile model to try. Definitely was never a big. I never thought the singles only idea was all that great of an idea, and it apparently, Billy said, "Oh, that was never the idea," but people just didn't see. They only reported my first sentence. They didn't report the other things I said about what my future plans were. So, I think maybe rightly or wrongly, this was always Billy's idea, and now we just have it in more explained in a more clearer way. So, I'm definitely excited about it.
Billy shouldn't be too greedy about the press coverage, because at least back then they included some verbs that he
True. Yeah, they quoted whole sentences at least, yes.
That's right.
So does this mean no more touring for Billy? I mean, that sounds like a pretty tough schedule. It almost sounds like a job. 1 song per month. Gotta get it in on deadline.
Oh yeah, there's that. I hadn't thought too much about that. I think, but there's also Billy has been known to nip into studios when he's on the road. Being on the road does not absolutely preclude them doing that month's songs that they gotta gotta pay the rent by the 31st. They gotta get that song out.
I actually think what's most exciting about the announcement or the rambling regarding releases was, I think that the actual getting songs every month or on a regular schedule would be great. Yes, it does seem like that is a lot of work, and it's questionable whether or not they'd be able to sustain actual live playing with that, but, they've done other crazy things like create songs and do residencies before, so, I don't necessarily think that would be out of the question, at least judging by the actual experience. But that being said, I think the really interesting part would be the sort of subscription model he outlines, where you'd be able to listen to things that are in progress, like different versions of songs, because I've always found that to be one of the most rewarding things to listen to. As a fan, I've always enjoyed listening to demos and listening to multiple versions of demos and then comparing them to the final releases, because I think that gives you a really interesting glimpse into the creative process. Billy's talked a lot about in the past and I'm going to screw up the exact quote, but being frustrated that people are only interested in listening to sort of the orgasmic climax of an artist's work, whereas he's been interested to listen to the work around the work, variations on an overture, classical structure, or variations on a theme in painting, where it's very interesting to see, yes, the final result, the one that gets sort of the most attention in the media or the most promotion from an artistic standpoint, because it's the final. It's always beautiful to see the work around the work as well. So I think that would be pretty cool. And I don't really know of other artists doing that besides like super indie artists that don't have a budget like my brother's band. So
I thought it was interesting that this sounds like the knee-jerk opposite of the way the Pumpkins have been since the reformation. So you were talking about the residencies. This is like the anti-residency. With the residencies, he was writing songs, and then they were performing them live the exact same day, with almost no perfection or polish. It was just like,
Right.
Billy writes it, they practice it, they play it live the same day. Whereas this sounds like the opposite. This is, he's in the studio, he writes one song, and they really, really work on making that song the absolute best it can possibly be in the studio. And I wonder how much of this idea is just because he is kind of, I don't want to say tired of touring, but I mean they've been touring quite a bit since Zeitgeist got released. And I wonder if, to Billy, maybe he's just thinking, man, all this touring, I would really just like to get back in the studio and just work. And he talked about it in this message, just about that, the whole experience of being in the studio. So I almost wonder, in a few months, after he does get this going and he's in the studio for a couple months, like working on these songs, I have to imagine, based on their past, that he's going to get that touring itch again.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's a performer. I mean, he's always derived his greatest sort of creative muse from the interaction with the audience, hasn't he? I mean, maybe that's an overstatement, but he thrives on that, negatively or positively.
Yeah, no doubt. He will tour again. There's no question. But yeah, I like that interpretation, Chris. I mean, ever since they finished, Zeitgeist, Billy liked to mention that it was 17 months, of putting it together. And after he'd finished it, he talked a lot about, why spend 17 months to do something people don't listen to and don't want it, and don't seem to have any use for, right?
Right.
And so you might view the entire tour, the spontaneity of the residencies, and I would add to that, the spontaneity of a lot of the stuff they created on tour. They were doing these 4-part cover songs, and Gossamer, and I Am One Part 2, and these other live covers, and new live songs, and all of that stuff, I think, had a kind of rough and ready, like, spontaneous, let's do it and see what happens, and see how well we can make it work in the moment vibe about all that, I mean, obviously Gossamer is well written. Obviously, I think all those songs are well written. I mean, Billy, they never get up there without a plan, and it's usually a very detailed plan, which is why so much of the criticism of the Fall Tour was retarded, because people like those new songs were just formless jams, as we know. That was a phrase that was written in many reviews, which is totally false, because all those songs were worked out very thoroughly. But point being that, they were kind of working, I don't know, I mean, as planned as they were, I think they weren't maybe considered at length, right? At least in their initial, I don't know, maybe I'm totally wrong, but I don't know if this is different or not, but I like what you're saying about, I mean, he clearly just wants to fuss with some sounds, and really mess around with a song on his own schedule, right? I don't think I just said anything whatsoever.
Well, I think it'll be really interesting to see how long he goes before, he kind of abandons the whole stay in the studio and
Or he
just
says-
release a song every month.
Where he says, "Let me out."
I mean, not to make the old joke about Billy not sticking to anything and criticize, like, because it's not really a criticism. It's more of a, like, I can totally understand it. Right now, he probably really just wants to buckle down and work in the studio, and eventually, he may not be thinking about it right now, but eventually he's just going to want to tour again, and everyone, I'm sure, will say, "Oh, but Billy said he was going to stay in studio and release a song every month. How come there's no song this month?" So everyone who's out there listening to this will hopefully be ready for that event a year from now or whatever, when he abandons the one song per month and does a little tour or something like that.
Think how much worse off we would all be if we actually held him to the promises he made. Some stupid promises. Like if we held him to this no albums, like, but Billy, you said singles.
Yeah.
How counterproductive would that be?
I don't know, though. If we were doing that, I'd be right now. I'd be at a Gish tour concert. So,
Yeah, where's my Gish tour?
well, back in episode 5 of the podcast, a long time ago, almost a year ago, we discussed whether the Pumpkins' biggest hit single was yet to come. And on the Chris Isaak Hour, Jimmy even said that he thought this was the case. But since we last talked about it, Jimmy has left, and Billy has outlined this release schedule we just talked about, which is, I think, different than what anyone else out there is doing. So, with this information, Jason, is Billy's hit single still yet to come, do you think?
Didn't I say I was probably the one who most thought it was?
Right.
In episode 5. I would still think so, yeah, I do. 1979 was not that... It didn't even make top 10. It's a low bar. And Billy is extremely talented. I think a lot of the stuff he's done in the last 10 years has been more pop-oriented than any of the original Pumpkins hits. You know? Chris, you and I love the Zwan song, Chrysanthemum. I think that song is a hit. You know? I think a song for the Sun is a hit. You know? I think Awada is a hit. You know, easily. And if he goes in the studio and really works on it, you know, it can happen. I'm not saying it will, because obviously a hit requires the rest of society to go along with the plan, right? But, you know, sure, it's possible. They do not have a track record of massive singles, so if they have one, it'll really be their first.
Watching the Chris Isaak Hour, I mean, almost any of those songs could be hits. 99 Floors is a little bit long, and Nowhere Man's obviously a cover, but I mean, they were phenomenal performances, and even the indie bloggers agree that they were outstanding performances and outstanding songs. And the Song for a Son didn't even get aired, so
those songs were sweet.
Yeah, why didn't they play these songs on the tour? I mean, really?
no kidding.
No kidding. If only they'd done that.
Now, they didn't actually say that.
Okay.
What do you think, Jill?
About them having an upcoming single or hit song?
Yes.
I think it's highly possible. I think it's going to take Billy a while to get his head screwed back on. No, I know that sounds terribly degrading, but I think that even though he hasn't said much about, or anything about, Jimmy's departure, and, you know, there's all these different outstanding projects that he wants to work on and so forth, I think it's going to be difficult to find some sort of, like, coherence or cohesion to his body of work going forward. I actually was talking to Jason about this recently, how I think that, you know, generally my tendency when I'm having sort of emotional issues or, like, a struggle personally, my way of coping with that is being hyper-productive, which it sounds like what Billy's trying to accomplish. And it's not necessarily a bad way of coping, but I think that, you know, focusing on many, many different things sometimes leads to a lack of coherence. And I think that it will be a while until, you know, I feel like a lot of these announcements lend credence to the fact that he wants to do more experimenting, and put out more, but ultimately he's going to return to that sort of the drive, the ultimate drive that he has to be, like, culturally relevant and, like, write a popular song for, you know, the masses to consume and be you know, achieve his populist desires. So, you know, we may see him go through a pretty introverted phase, or, like, sort of tangential phase to the Smashing Pumpkins, something that's more experimental that may not be... I mean, I don't think it's mutually exclusive with trying to write a really big hit song, because, like, he's always going to want to try to do that, but his own ambition may get in the way of doing something simple that would ultimately become a very popular song. Because if you look at what's popular right now, nothing's very complicated. There's not a high level of musicianship in the scene now, unless you consider Katy Perry's, like, musical acumen to be quite high. So...
It's innocent. I think Billy's side band is going to be called Synthesizer with a Z.
Maybe
Synthesizers with the Z at the end.
We are stars. I'm going to see We Are Stars tonight, featuring synthesizers.
Star Children's.
Well, I think that
Or
the
wait,
idea
no.
of spending a bunch of time working on each individual song, I mean, that seems like it could work to his benefit. Because in the past, we've seen songs evolve over time, both into versions that we like better and versions that we don't care for as much. But when he works on one song for a month, if he really does stick to that and, writes the song and then perfects it and perfects it and perfects it, it could be...
It'll suck.
Well,
All the
it could do either. It could be...
all the urgency will go out of it. And
It could be Rocket 96, where he took a song that already was a single and in my mind made it even better.
That didn't happen in the studio, though.
Well, I have to think that he did the arrangement in the studio before they played it on tour.
Okay, but that's true of any... I don't know. That's probably... I mean, you would make that same... Oh, he probably... I mean, all the stuff I was mentioning they did on the last tour, Oh, they probably did that in the studio.
Maybe he'll start getting some crazy ideas about collaborating with Lil Wayne. Go back to his, what did he say, baby-faced killer roots. I read that and I was like, what?
Chris,
Did I really read that?
I just don't know that this is that totally different. I mean, he says it is. I just don't know. You know what I mean? I've never really perceived Smashing Pumpkins studio material as being dashed off. It took 17 months to record Zeitgeist, which has dozens songs on it.
But how many other songs were they also working on that didn't make the cut? It has...
Okay, but, yeah, that's true. But if he does 44 songs over 2 or 3 years, isn't that like the same thing?
Well, it depends. Does he work on one song and then release it and stop? Or
See,
does he keep working on it?
but see, I've already won, because I'm saying it's not that different. And if we're debating that, well, does he do them one at a time, or does he... it's not that different.
He's just not going away for 24 months to write the album. He's trying to make him, he's trying to be quick, or, try to speed up his release cycle so he stays in the public eye rather than going off in the studio and not making any public appearances for 2 years. But that was the original motivation, and I believe that motivation. And when I hear this stuff about I'm going to perfect the songs, blah blah blah, I see that as like a post hoc, this will be cool too. I'm going to make the songs better, and I don't really buy that as much. Yeah, I would tend to agree. I think there's a certain degree. I know personally I don't write songs, but when you spend there's amount of time you spend doing something creative, and then at some point you kind of have to say, okay, it's good enough, or there's no point in polishing it anymore. It's kind of time to say it's done and then move on to something else. And I think Billy probably does that, but now that he's doing it on this cycle now, it'll be more obvious in terms of for the stars on or the songs on Zeitgeist. It might have if you sort of averaged it out, each one of those songs might have took a month apiece to sort of get to their final form, or not. I don't know. I don't think we've ever had a good picture of what the life cycle of the recording process is like for Billy in general. So
I kind of wonder if the songs don't end up sounding more alike. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
When you're thinking about putting together an album, you're thinking about, okay, well, this part is gonna, I need a quiet song now, or I need a loud song now, or I need a long song now, if you're I'm putting out a song every month, do they all end up 4 minutes long and kind of rocking? I don't know.
That's true.
If they all have to stand on their own, do you ever have a simple short song?
Well, and you talked about the losing the sense of urgency. What popped into my head was the song "Blissed and Gone," which at first, the first time we heard it, when Billy played it live, it was this very simple acoustic song that was, I thought, very beautiful. And then when it eventually got released or it got recorded in the studio and released, it became this kind of electro synth song that I didn't find nearly as interesting. So there's always the chance of that happening too. guess it could
Yes.
go either way.
We have both versions.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that
Okay, good.
they're not that he shouldn't have done it or anything.
Destroyed my memory,
You took
bastard.
You took demo.
Maybe BC will start being extremely culturally relevant. Do you like how I used that twice today? Like South Park, and make like current event songs.
Oh no.
It'll be like well, that's I was thinking. It reminded me of that guy who does the songs once a day on YouTube. He writes a new song every day. The guy who did the Hey Paul Krugman song. So there you go.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very timely.
He's gonna start a blog and a Twitter. Try to get a lot of followers to follow his songs.
Can't wait for his song about the Obama dog.
Entitled, what would it be called?
Obama.
Obama.
We've kind of gone far afield from the question of whether whether this is going to lead to Billy's biggest hit. But what do you guys think about? I mean, if he does this and releases a song every month, when you release an album, there's a whole lot of promotional buzz and excitement around the release of this album. If he does this thing where he releases a song every month, isn't that cut down a little bit? There isn't as much buzz about each individual song just because it's happening so frequently.
I don't think that they're subject to that particular model of publicity. Like, that's very true when we're talking about like indie bands. You know, when there's like Blipster album of the month getting released that Pitchfork picks up and is like, oh my god, is this the next MIA? Are they going to do, another Slumdog Millionaire and make this into the soundtrack? Like, you have to sort of create that buzz via the album. But the Smashing Pumpkins and Billy Corgan have kind of like reached this, they're in the current contemporary like cultural dialogue. So if they're releasing stuff, it's going to be blogged about and publicized at the level at which any other indie band would be releasing its catalog, its full like year-long release. So and the people that we love to hate are going to pick up this stuff and blog about, at least he's going to stay in the news.
Yeah, I was gonna say it almost like seems fitting for our current age. It's like
right. He's gonna tweet his song soon.
You're generating, you're consistently generating small memes.
I think they get more publicity this way because you stay current and you stay sort of immediate. In the past, I think the model was the way you talked about, Chris, where they sort of get more buzz off of albums, but this way you're getting more like small reviews, I think.
Now they
perhaps
can go
in publications that care more.
Yeah, they can go play Letterman every month now. It's a new single.
Oh, kind of like wasn't Pajo on Letterman last night? Didn't we get a message about that?
Saturday
SNL.
Oh, SNL. That's right. Anybody catch that one?
I didn't recognize him at all, actually.
No,
I watched it.
I watched
it was
it,
like,
didn't
oh,
recognize
that's
him.
Pajo? Wow, okay.
He's never been a very. He's never stuck out that much.
Yeah. I wouldn't have, had we not gotten that reader note, I would not have
Was
even even thought about it with him.
Was he in his Skullfisher getup?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
Forgot about that. Oh, talk about some kitschy t-shirts that I will never wear again. I mean, do you disagree with that, Chris, about the publicity?
I kind of do. I think that at first they will get publicity because they're doing something different. And I'm still calling it they, really, it's Billy. But I think at first he will get publicity because he's doing something different. But I think eventually it will just kind of get assimilated into everything else that's going on. And I think you're right that they'll still get blogged about and reviewed by, the indie blogs, but do the indie blogs make things number one singles? I think it has to be bigger than that in order to become a number one single. And I don't know if he's going to get huge by just releasing something every month and getting picked up by indie blogs.
Well, that's a totally different claim claim? I mean, you're basically saying that he's not going to try for any radio promotion. You know, I mean, you're like not. You're now categorizing the extent of the promotional effort that the band is going to put in. You know, who says he doesn't pick a song, you know, maybe every 3 months or every 4 months and put a radio push behind it like they did for Glow. You know,
Or try to go on Kimmel.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, if they're staying out in LA, I think it behooves them to be out there where they can do some other counter or cross-promotional work.
Sure. Yeah, and I think something like that would work fine. I don't know.
I mean, I guess that speaks more, your argument speaks more to the core of how to popularize your band these days without using the internet. You know, I think that if you're not U2 or Madonna, what are your options? And you know, TV doesn't talk about new albums unless they're on some sort of cross-promotional show.
Or ironically, unless they're in advertisements.
Right.
I mean, he could always be in the latest iTunes ad.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Here, buy our products and be cool like Billy Corgan.
Maybe
your
he
friends
can
will
be
think
one
you're
of the...
Actually, that might be the best. That's the most visually appealing image I've had all day. An iTunes ad featuring the awkward silhouette of Billy
I
Corgan
was just going to say that Billy is the dancing silhouette with
in,
the
in
earbuds
bright
in.
pink. We're gonna have to. I think we're gonna have to make an image for you for the podcast post.
Please do.
Oh. I mean, other than sort of trying to do cross promotional things, how do you get into the cultural dialogue
Oh, I thought you were going to say Zeitgeist.
for that?
That's 2007.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot bigger question.
And so, when you're faced with the options, you're faced with the alternatives between holing up in the studio for 12 months or more and releasing stuff regularly and befriending people who get a lot of celebrity buzz.
Yeah, like you.
I think it's a
Scream
calculated
you're
move.
a dick. I mean, that's how you.
Yeah.
And also, they're the band's in a completely different state than they were when they set out to do Zeitgeist. When they had Zeitgeist, they had their deal with Warner Brothers to put out one album, and they did that. Now they don't have a deal with anybody, so this is what Billy thinks is the future of distributing music. So it's obviously the direction they're going to go to. They could make any decision they want, or Billy, we have to keep calling it. Still, we're calling Billy they, but
He's many people. He's mercury filled. He's
7 veils of Apollo. They're complete free agents now, and so Billy can go in the direction that he thinks is the most efficient to move forward. And I guess we now know what that decision is. So we'll have to maybe convene again in 2011 and see how it turns out.
I never really get the free agent metaphor because you have to sign with the team, otherwise you're just like not playing, right?
Jeff George is also a free agent.
That's right.
And has been for the past 6 or 7 years, I believe.
I'm available.
Well, it's been about a year since we started this podcast. So now that the year has gone by, I think it's about time to retire the This Week in Pumpkins history segments.
Wah, wah, wah.
Wah, wah.
If you have any ideas for any other short recurring segments you'd like to hear us do, you can use the contact form on hipstersunited.com or leave your ideas in the comments. We reserve the right to reject any segments we don't want to do.
and just to be clear, the This Week in Pumpkin History was a fan suggestion, so we do.
Yes, it was. We do listen to some
we do
suggestions.
listen. Yes, it has happened.
We really do value your input.
But our closing song this week is 99 Floors from the Chris Isaak Hour, which aired 2 weeks ago, but the performance itself is from December of 2008. Good night, everybody.
Oh.
used to know you. I used to care. I used to know you. Are you still there? I won't touch you, I won't feel you, I won't hear you, I won't see you. I used to know you. Are you still there? I used to know you. I used to care. It goes far and wide, this cruel device. I cannot drive you from my mind. I won't reach out, I won't strike in, I won't dream about, I won't ask the thought. I used to know you. I used to care. I used to know you. Are you still there? I jumped from the top and fell right back, and I hit the bricks running, scared. I swam to the bottom of the sea, and I asked around for someone who might know me. Ain't it sad when your choices are Vegas and your friends 99 floors and still nowhere to go. 99 floors and still nowhere to roam. A punch to the head, I passed right out, and a hypnotist stood down, struck and stared. Found once again by the fist of fate, I prayed for his resurrection home. Ain't it sad when your choices are vices or advice? It's 11 o'clock and don't that make you pause? It's 11 o'clock and don't it make you pause? Evil, feeling oh so loud. I'm slow to anger, wonder where I could ever go. You know I'd have to forget. I cannot drive
podcast is not affiliated with or endorsed by the Smashing Pumpkins, Virgin Records, or Warner Brothers Reprise Records. All opinions offered by panelists or guests of the Hipsters United podcast are their own and do not represent the opinions of the Smashing Pumpkins. All audio during the show is licensed for non-profit use per the terms and conditions on the Live Music Archive at archive.org. Intro music is from the Machina 2 album released for free download on the internet by the Smashing Pumpkins in September of 2000.